For years, I was the family's safety net, the dependable one who always showed up when everyone else fell apart. I paid the bills, fixed the messes, watched the kids, and stayed silent through every insult because she's family. But one night at what was supposed to be a peaceful anniversary dinner, everything changed. A single comment, cruel, casual, and directed at my son, shattered the illusion I'd been living under. That night, I realized I wasn't the problem. I was just the only one who ever cleaned up the chaos. And when I finally stood up for myself, my entire family learned what happens when the stable one finally stops catching everyone else's fall. Stay till the end, because this isn't just a family drama. It's a story about boundaries, betrayal, and the quiet power of walking away with your peace intact. "We didn't order for your child," my sister Taryn said, tugging the bread basket toward my son, as if that were hospitality. Her boys were already sawing into thick-cut steaks and comparing dessert photos. My father, Calvin, added without looking up, "You knew he'd be hungry. You should have packed something." I smiled and let the word land like a pebble in a pond. Noted. I had offered to host my parents' 40th anniversary dinner, booked the nicest black-owned steakhouse in Rivercrest, reserved a private room, even brought a restored portrait from their wedding day, the one where my Mother Ruth's veil floated like smoke. I wanted a simple night. Good food, gentle conversation, no rescuing. That had been my mistake, expecting a family that routinely treated Taryn's crises like weather to arrive without a storm. We were 5 minutes early. My son, Cairo, squeezed my hand as we walked in, his voice quiet and hopeful. Could he get dessert if he ate his dinner? I told him he could choose anything that made his eyes light up. Inside, Taryn and her husband, Quentin, were already claimed by the room, he with a drink, their 2 boys warring over tablet volume. Taryn didn't rise. She glanced over her shoulder like I'd interrupted a show. "Oh, hey." My mother's hug was distracted. My father didn't bother to stand. No one asked Cairo about school, his art project, the way he'd saved allowance for a model car. No one noticed the wrapped frame in my bag. I unfolded Cairo's napkin and read the menu with him, his finger landing on the chicken tenders like a little flag. I was about to signal the waiter when Taryn slid the bread toward him again. "We didn't order for your child." She said it the way someone might tell you the sky exists. I waited for the correction that wasn't coming. Then my father offered the kind of advice that arrives as a verdict. "If you knew he eats, you should have brought something." The air shifted. Cairo's mouth tugged downward, just a notch. My mother took a sip of water and studied the condensation on her glass. Taryn wore a small, satisfied smile I recognized from years of her soft landings, always cushioned by me, by our parents, by whoever would hurry to catch her. There are moments when the math of your life becomes obvious. I saw the spreadsheet in my mind. Late-night pickups, emergency babysitting, rent bridges, surprise deposits, school pickups when storms hit. I saw my mother's refrain, "She's going through a lot," applied like primer over rot. It wasn't that they wouldn't change. It was that they had no incentive to while I kept cushioning the fall. I lifted my hand. The waiter materialized with the kind of attentive calm that belongs to people who solve problems for a living. "Please cancel anything that hasn't reached the kitchen," I said, standing. "And everything already on its way? Kindly place it on my father's tab. Tonight is his celebration." Silence traveled around the table in a clean circle. I turned back to the waiter. "My son will have the house ribeye, medium rare, truffle macaroni, and a cola." "Thank you." We'd appreciate it promptly. Quentin coughed into his glass. Taryn blinked, as if something small had flown directly at her eye. My mother opened her mouth, then thought better of it. From the end of the table, Uncle Lionel released a single laugh that sounded like a door click. Aunt Patrice's mouth curved, and she didn't try to hide it. The waiter nodded and slid away. I sat down, broke a breadstick, and placed it in Cairo's hand. He took it quietly, but his shoulders loosened. He knew, as sure as I did, that something had tilted back toward level. Dinner kept moving, but not for them. Taryn's boys groused about delays. Quentin leaned in to whisper, the way cowards hide behind breath. My parents exchanged tiny looks, conferences of people deciding whether a boundary is an insult. I answered none of it. When Cairo's plate arrived, a gorgeous cut resting in its own shine, my father stared at it like a challenge had been served medium rare. Gratitude did not occur to him. He stayed mute. I decided the night would not take anything else from my son. We ate. Cairo told me which cars he planned to draw next week. I told him I wanted to see the sketch. When the checks came, I slipped the restored photo from my bag and handed it to the waiter with a small request. Place it on the table after we leave. Let the past sit with them without me there to narrate. We rose. I took Cairo's hand. At the doorway, my shoulder clipped the dessert cart. A plate shattered in a white burst. I didn't apologize. Accidents happen when you stop shrinking. By the time I buckled Cairo into the car, my phone was already lighting up. Calls, texts, voicemails blooming like a rash. Taryn, what is wrong with you? My father, you owe me for that room. My mother, you humiliated us. I drove home to the quiet that follows a decision. Cairo showered, folded into bed with his favorite blanket, and was asleep in minutes. I turned my phone face down on the counter. The red notification badges glowed like tiny sirens. I let them wail to themselves. Morning brought certainty with the sun. When they said they were coming over, they didn't ask if it worked for me. They never did. The grace I used to grant them, cleaning, preparing, softening, did not stir in me. Cairo spotted their car first and looked up with a tiredness I knew in my own bones. I called Uncle Lionel. They're here, I said. We're on the way, he answered. No performance. No questions. I opened the front door before my family could knock. My mother swept in like she was inspecting a rental she owned. Taryn followed, arms crossed, jaw wired tight. My father trailed behind, clutching a manila envelope the way men carry the idea of authority. They didn't say hello. They didn't greet Cairo, who sat on the couch pretending to focus on his handheld console while tracking every word. You embarrassed the whole family last night, Taryn began, her voice arranged like a headline. I didn't answer. My mother jumped in, the chorus to Taryn's verse. You made a scene. You disrespected your father. We have never been so humiliated. It was rich from the same people who once shouted through a chain restaurant over a missing coupon, but I didn't bother connecting dots for them. My father set the envelope on the counter and tapped it with 2 fingers. Invoice for the private room. $950. Since you decided not to follow through, this is your share. Entitlement, worn like a tailored jacket. I didn't touch the envelope. Wait here, I said, and stepped to the side door. 2 minutes later, the side latch turned and Uncle Lionel and Aunt Patrice walked in, their presence changing the oxygen level. My mother's smile fell off. Taryn muttered something she didn't have the courage to enunciate. My father's expression soured like milk left out. I re-entered the kitchen and stood across from them, the counter a clean border between our histories. I'm done underwriting Taryn's life, I said. No preamble, no apology. She isn't my child. I'm not her emergency fund. I've been covering a portion of their rent for months. That ends now. If they want to stay where they are, Quentin can step up or she can downsize. Taryn's voice rose from the back of her throat, sharp and useless. I didn't look at her. My mother pivoted to Lionel, trying to draft him into the old choreography, keep out of private matters. Patrice cut in, voice low and even as a level. She named what I had carried, money, childcare, rides, groceries, the emotional janitorial work, and then asked a single question that hovered in the room like truth. When's the last time any of you helped Naya? They didn't answer. I opened the envelope. The paper inside listed a number and a room name, sterile as a receipt. Here's what happens, I said. I'll cover $475, not because I owe you, but because I like to sleep well knowing your entitlement didn't win the full amount. My father's palms smacked the counter. My mother's face folded into a theater of wounded righteousness. Taryn's body pitched forward like she might test how quickly I'd call 911. Leave, I said, and walked to the door. I held it open with the same patience I once used to hold their collapses. They hesitated, then moved, muttering, letting the door clap behind them the way people do when they want the sound to argue in their place. I locked the deadbolt and stood in the hush they left behind. It wasn't joy. It wasn't grief. It was a clear field after a long storm, the ground still wet, the air rinsed out. I believed, for one soft minute, that the worst was over. It wasn't, but that was for another part of the story. By sunset, my phone sounded like a hive. Missed calls stacked on missed calls. Text scrolled in long as sermons. The voicemails had a choreography. Taryn indignant, my father transactional, my mother wounded. I let them pile up. Cairo and I cooked pasta, watched his favorite car design videos, and turned in early. Peace is loud when you haven't heard it in a while. The next morning brought a fresh wave. Paragraphs on paragraphs, accusations, rewrites of last night that would have earned extra credit in creative fiction. I answered none of it. 2 days of silence from me, and that's when the performance moved to a bigger stage. Taryn posted a vague book masterpiece about certain family members who think they're above everyone, heavy on gratitude for real parents who taught love. The sympathy rolled in like tide, hearts, prayers, distant cousins offering hugs from couches they never left. My inbox buzzed with people asking what happened. I said nothing. I had learned that explanations are oxygen to fires you don't intend to feed. The retaliation took a sharper turn a week later when the front office at Cairo's school called, an anonymous concern about his emotional well-being. The counselor met with him that afternoon. He was fine, quiet, thoughtful, kind to kids who needed help with math. She told me as much with professional gentleness and a quiet eye roll that said she'd seen families weaponize institutions before. Still, a record existed now, thin as paper, heavy as brick. The principal warned me that sometimes a second anonymous call can trigger automatic reviews. The threat wasn't subtle. It wasn't meant to be. Next came a group text my mother assembled like a courtroom. Aunts, uncles, cousins who preferred updates to truth. She wrote that one daughter had cut off family for no reason and that her heart was breaking. No names, because cowards love blanks. Uncle Lionel replied with one sentence, "We know exactly what's going on," and exited the stage. Taryn left the thread 10 minutes later. Then Quentin called. I didn't have his number saved. It rang through like a stranger. I let it drift to voicemail. He said he wanted to stay neutral, hoped the kids wouldn't be caught in the middle, as if Cairo were a chess piece I'd shoved across a board. I blocked his number and felt nothing but the click of a boundary settling into place. 10 days after the dinner, my father strolled into my workplace lobby like he was dropping off dry cleaning. He handed the receptionist a manila envelope and asked for me. When I came out, he produced a photo from the restaurant, me standing, Cairo looking up, everyone else pinched and performative. He circled himself in red marker and wrote, "This is who you embarrassed." I didn't take it. "You need to leave," I said. He did, carrying his prop with him. That night, after Cairo's bedside prayer and a deep exhale, I let myself feel all of it. Not sorrow, exactly, but the disorienting ache of realizing you've been arguing with a story your family likes better than the truth. I could have swung back and scorched earth. Instead, I tried something I hadn't before, a calm line. I wrote 2 letters by hand, one to my parents, one to Taryn. No heat, no hooks. I said I wanted peace, that I would not accept blame, guilt, or manipulation anymore. If we were to move forward, it had to be respectful and mutual. I mailed them and waited. A week passed. Then my mother posted a photo. Her and Taryn, cheek to cheek, Taryn's boys mugging in front. The caption, "Family is everything, even when some forget." It was the kind of sentence that tries to pin you to a wall and call it a hug. I didn't rage. I opened my laptop. First, I gathered proof. I emailed my landlord for documentation of every transfer I'd made toward Taryn's rent. He replied within the hour, line items, amounts, dates, 7 months' worth. I printed each page, highlighted the payments, drafted a neat summary, and mailed a flat envelope to Taryn. No note. 12 minutes later, my phone chimed with a screenshot, her payment app balance showing a number barely big enough for bus fare, plus 4 words, Take me to court then. I didn't bite. Instead, I posted anonymously in a private parenting group I trust, Black women who tell the truth. Would you forgive a sister who took money for months, lied, and then shamed you when you set a boundary? The comments flooded in. Most were versions of my own story told with different names. One woman messaged privately to say she'd worked with Taryn at a marketing firm. After a petty disagreement, Taryn had filed a false HR complaint that cost her a demotion and, 3 months later, her job. I didn't know whether to believe her until she sent a party photo. Taryn poolside in a designer dress, wine in hand, timestamped the same weekend she'd texted me that Quentin was in the air and she had nothing for the boys. I had sent her $200 that day. I saved the photo and moved on. While clearing a shelf in the garage later that week, I found an old box from my childhood, construction paper crowns, birthday cards in my mother's careful script, and at the bottom, an envelope addressed from my mother to my father dated 22 years ago, a week after Taryn's birth. I wasn't meant to see it. In looping blue ink, my mother wrote about her exhaustion, how overwhelmed she felt, and then a quiet sentence that split the room inside me. I don't think I will ever bond with this new baby. I feel like I'm pretending. I'm too tired to try. I knew who the new baby had been. I sat on the concrete floor a long time. Moments aligned. The rehearsed distance in my mother's eyes. The way my wins never registered. The constant triage of Taryn's disasters. The letter didn't absolve anyone. It did explain the script. That night, after Cairo fell asleep, I wrote a single email. No subject line. Just facts. I listed transfers, screenshots, texts, the false narratives, the photo from the pool day, and I attached the last paragraph of the letter. Only that paragraph. I sent it to my parents and to Taryn. Then I blocked their numbers, emails, and social accounts. I didn't do it to punish them. I did it to stop bleeding. For a breath, there was quiet. 48 hours later, a knock at the door broke it open. The knock came soft and steady, not frantic, the kind that doesn't warn you something life-altering is on the other side. It was 2:40 in the afternoon. I'd just ended a remote work call and was folding Cairo's laundry, half listening to the hum of the dryer. When I opened the door, 2 women stood there, plain clothes, calm faces, badges glinting. Child Protective Services, one said. At first, I thought they had the wrong address. Then she asked for me by full name. The world thinned. Someone anonymous, of course, had reported that I left Cairo home alone for long periods, that he seemed withdrawn and possibly neglected. The words didn't match reality, but fear has its own gravity. My spine went cold. Still, I let them in. They were professional, polite even. They checked the fridge, glanced at the laundry, peeked into Cairo's room. It was spotless. Books stacked, bed made, art supplies on his desk. They asked questions about meals, routines, school. I answered every one. They called his school before leaving. His teachers confirmed he was thriving, respectful, top of his class, mentoring younger kids in art club. Before they left, one of the caseworkers apologized. We get these sometimes, she said, voice low. Family disputes. We still have to document it. Document it. The word clanged. Because a report like that doesn't vanish. It lingers in systems, waiting for repetition. The principal later explained the risk. 2 complaints, even unfounded, could trigger an automatic investigation. This wasn't about care. It was punishment. That night, after Cairo went to bed, I sat on the couch staring at nothing and called Uncle Lionel. He listened without interruption. Then he said quietly, that was the warning shot. You need to move. He didn't mean physically, not yet. He meant strategically. So I began to gather again. I printed everything. Rent statements, the landlord receipts, the poolside photo, the text where Taryn thanked me for saving her again, the Venmo screenshots, every message laced with guilt. Then I found a birthday card from her tucked in an old scrapbook, Cairo's 2nd birthday. In her loopy handwriting. Thanks for being the stable one. I'd fall apart without you. Literally. That went in the folder, too. By the end of the night, the dining table looked like a command center, stacks of proof, each labeled, color-coded, sealed in plastic sleeves. The next morning, I called a lawyer. She specialized in family harassment cases, the kind where kinship turns into control. When I finished explaining, she didn't sound surprised. "We'll send cease and desists," she said. "They'll understand what boundaries look like on legal letterhead." 3 letters went out. One to my parents, one to Taryn, one to Quentin. Each documented harassment, online defamation, the false CPS claim, unpaid debt. Each warned that any further contact would trigger criminal and civil action. For the first time in months, I exhaled. 2 days later, Quentin texted from a number I hadn't blocked. It contained one image, a screenshot of a bank transfer. $2,850, half of what I'd covered in their rent. No caption. Then another text followed. I told her to stop. "I've moved out. Do what you have to." It took me a long while to process that. Quentin, spineless, evasive Quentin, had finally abandoned the chaos. Aunt Patrice called soon after. She'd run into my mother at the grocery store. "Your mama looks worn down," she said. "Was muttering in the aisle about you destroying the family." Patrice had looked her dead in the eye. "Naya didn't destroy anything," she said. "She just quit playing your game." After that, messages came from everywhere, relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. A cousin confessed Taryn borrowed $600 months earlier and never paid it back. Another aunt said she once drove 2 hours to rescue her after a fight with Quentin and never got a thank you. The stories piled up like a shared realization. I wasn't the only one she'd drained. Just the last one still standing. For a brief window, it felt like freedom. Like maybe the war was over. Then a letter arrived. Thin envelope, heavy paper. Not from Taryn. Not from my parents. From their attorney. One sentence made my stomach twist. "We are pursuing visitation rights for your son, Cairo." They were about to make their obsession legal. The envelope wasn't even thick, but it felt like stone in my hand. Inside was a single-page letter from my parents' attorney. It said they were filing for grandparent visitation rights, claiming I denied them access to Cairo out of spite, that I was damaging his emotional development, and had severed ties with his extended family without cause. It was more than absurd, it was sinister. These were the same people who had ignored him at dinner, told me to pack him something, and made him sit quietly while their grandsons devoured $80 steaks. Now, they wanted to play the victims of estrangement. For a few minutes, I just stared at the page. Then the fear evaporated, replaced by something colder and sharper. Not anger, strategy. I called my lawyer. She skimmed the document in silence, then said flatly, "They don't have a case. Georgia law is clear. Grandparents can't override a competent parent's decisions unless the child's welfare is endangered. But this isn't about Cairo." She paused. "This is about control. They're trying to wear you down." That's when I understood. This wasn't about love or access or family. It was about punishment. They couldn't reach me emotionally anymore, so they were reaching through the courts. The next morning, I went into overdrive. First, my attorney filed an immediate response. Not just a rejection, but a counterfile stacked with receipts. Every exhibit mattered. Screenshots, texts, voice messages, the closed CPS report, rent transfers, the photo of my father's circled red face. Each one became a brick in a wall they couldn't climb. Then I called Cairo's school and submitted formal documentation banning my parents and Taryn from all access, no pickups, no volunteering, no contact at events. The principal, who had seen too much of this kind of thing, quietly approved. Next came the locks. I changed every one. The locksmith didn't ask why, and I didn't offer it. After that, I met with my attorney again to update my living will. If anything happened to me, custody of Cairo would go to Uncle Lionel and Aunt Patrice, not a single-price family member within reach. They got full legal guardianship access, copies of bank information, emergency plans, and all documentation. When that was done, I called a friend from college, Alicia, who now worked in cybersecurity for a major social platform. I asked a single question. "Can you trace where an anonymous CPS report came from?" She hesitated. "Not officially. But if the submission came through an IP log, we can reference patterns." A few hours later, she called back. "I can't give you details," she said carefully, But let's just say it came from a familiar zip code. Very familiar. That was all I needed to hear. It was Taryn, the same sister whose rent I'd covered, whose kids I'd babysat, whose chaos I'd cleaned up for years. She had filed a false report to weaponize the system against me, against my child. The fury that hit me wasn't loud. It was clean, focused, a pulse made of glass. That night, I packed everything neatly, documents, letters, screenshots, bank transfers, that birthday card with her handwriting. I slid the folders into a locked case. Not for revenge, but for readiness. Because I knew they weren't done. People like that never stop until you make them. 2 weeks later, the court officially rejected their petition, dismissed with prejudice, meaning they couldn't refile. But I didn't celebrate. I knew what came next. Every manipulator, when cornered, finds one last card to play. I wrote one final letter. Not an email, not a text, a real letter, printed and signed. I mailed 3 copies. To my parents, to Taryn, and to their attorney. This is the last time you will hear from me. I gave you years of grace, of help, of silence. You returned it with betrayal, lies, and legal threats aimed at my child. You are no longer my family. If you attempt contact, I will file for a restraining order. If you appear at my home, I will call the police. If you continue to involve yourselves in my life, I will make every detail public. We are done, permanently. Then I did something I'd never done before. I erased them completely. New phone number, new email, new locks. Every social account private or scrubbed. Every mutual contact severed. For the first time in my life, the air in my home didn't feel borrowed. But I didn't realize peace was waiting just ahead. Quiet, simple, and real. Because that weekend, Cairo and I packed 2 duffel bags and drove north to Timber Falls, a quiet camping reserve tucked beyond the pines. No signal, no noise, no family. Just us. When the sun dropped, we sat by the fire, marshmallows melting into gold. He looked up at me, cheeks glowing orange in the light. You seem happier, he said. I smiled. I am. He nodded, thoughtful, and went back to toasting his marshmallow. For the first time in years, I believed him. We were safe. We were free. And no matter what came next, that freedom wasn't theirs to take anymore. 6 months later, the world had gone still. The calls had stopped. The letters had never returned. The family that once hovered like static around every decision had finally faded into distance, not silence born of reconciliation, but the kind that grows after a forest fire when nothing else is left to burn. Cairo and I had built a new rhythm in our new city, a smaller, brighter place called Maple Harbor, where the mornings smelled of rain and magnolias. I took a job as a regional project analyst for a local environmental foundation. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. No one there knew me as someone's daughter or sister. Just Naya. Every weekday morning, Cairo and I walked to his middle school at the corner of Belrose Avenue. He wore the same navy backpack and the same wide grin when he waved goodbye. Sometimes, I'd wait at the gate until he disappeared through the double doors, just breathing in the ordinary peace of a normal day. I rented a modest 2-bedroom condo downtown, warm light, real bookshelves, walls painted the color of coffee and cream. On weekends, we hosted Uncle Lionel and Aunt Patrice for dinner. They always brought sweet tea and laughter. Family, as it turned out, didn't need matching DNA, only mutual respect. One evening, after Cairo had gone to bed, I found myself sitting on the balcony, overlooking the quiet streetlights. I opened my journal, the same one I'd started the night after that dinner chaos months ago. The pages were filled with receipts, notes, quotes from my lawyer, and a few lines from Maya Angelou I'd written in all caps. I not only have the right to stand up for myself, I have the duty to. I traced those words with my thumb. That night, I drafted a final email, not to my family, but to myself. A closure letter. You did not lose them. You released them. You stopped trying to water dead roots. You built safety out of honesty, peace out of distance, and home out of love that wasn't conditional. What they called rebellion was really recovery. I hit save, not send. Outside, rain began to fall, light and steady against the balcony rail. I poured tea, opened the sliding door, and let the sound wash through the room. Cairo shuffled out, sleepy-eyed. "Can't sleep," he murmured. I pulled a blanket over his shoulders and pointed toward the rain. "That sound," I said, "means everything's growing." He smiled, leaned against me, and closed his eyes. And for the first time in my entire life, I didn't feel like the dependable one holding everyone else together. I felt like a woman standing on her own foundation, one built from truth, boundaries, and quiet power. If you've ever had to be the strong one, the peacekeeper, the provider, the one who held the family together until it broke you, this story was for you. Sometimes healing doesn't look like forgiveness. Sometimes it looks like silence, boundaries, and walking away with your dignity intact. If Naya's story moved you, drop a red heart in the comments and tell me where you're watching from, because stories like this remind us that peace is power, and walking away can be the loudest victory of all. Backhand index pointing right follow for more powerful Black family stories, tales of strength, survival, and self-respect that prove you don't always have to fight to win. Sometimes, you just have to stop catching what was never yours to carry.